I mean, it was over 6 months that she worked with them, and it showed in her commitment for the training. Her action scene is...
Yeah, he ends up getting the sledgehammer he brings out, but why did he have it there?
Keanu Reeves has spent 4 decades as Hollywood's quiet guardian, calm in chaos, gracious in an industry fueled by ego and competition. But in this fictional account, behind the kindness and humility lies a truth he has never shared. Rumors swirl of explosive tempers, risky on-set behavior, and one actor whose extreme method approach frightened entire crews. These aren't simple disagreements. They're stories powerful studios supposedly tried to hide, explaining why certain legends were never placed beside Reeves again. Think you know who he clashed with? Think again. What follows may change how you imagine Hollywood's biggest names forever. Alec Baldwin. Among the 6 names that Keanu Reeves discreetly added to his confidential list of people he would never see again, Alec Baldwin was the single most surprising addition. Not because they compete for the same parts, nor because they ever compete for attention, but rather because the reason behind their breakup touched the one concept that Keanu prioritizes more than fame, money, or recognition. A respect for the individuals that are there in the same room as him. The act of shouting was not the beginning of their narrative. Tension was present at the beginning. Both of these men were making rapid progress in the late 1990s. It was said that Alec Baldwin was a powerful force in nature, an entertainer that appeared on stage like a storm and had the ability to either amuse or demolish the audience, depending on the time of day. The opposite was true for Keanu. A steady breath, a tranquil river, and a man who made silence feel more like a strength than a weakness were all characteristics of this man. 2 forces that are going in the same industry are destined to collide with one another. In the early years of the new millennium, the moment that everything began to change took place within the confines of a private roundtable that was attended by fewer than 30 individuals. It was a place where creators and actors could speak openly about their work. The kind of space where reputations may be altered without a single headline being written about it. The on-set behavior was subjected to moderate criticism from a director. There is nothing cynical or personal about it. Despite this, Alec Baldwin found that it was sufficient to set the fuse ablaze. After getting up from his seat, he motioned around the room and proclaimed that there were certain individuals who were present who did not have the right to be there. After that, his gaze fell to Keanu in a straightforward manner. When the words were finally spoken, the stillness that followed was even more devastating. When it came to Keanu, pride was not an issue. It was about the fundamental human decency that he believed would be merited by every single individual working on a set, from the lead actor to the assistant who was just hired. At that same moment, a line was drawn, a silent one that was obscured from view by everyone else, except for the individual who had set it there. After a number of years had passed, Keanu made a hushed statement about that kind of event during an interview in Japan. He stated that the memory of someone who expresses their genuine regard for you in front of other people is one that will not be forgotten. It was not necessary for him to mention Alec Baldwin. Keanu's instincts were only sharpened over time, but Hollywood was the one that connected the dots for him. Every year, Alec Baldwin's disagreements became more audible. The horrible tragedy that occurred on the set of Rust, which startled the entire globe, was followed by physical fights, legal upheaval, public meltdowns, and finally, the public meltdown. Keanu was never of the opinion that these occurrences were a chance occurrence. He found them to be a pattern that he had identified for a considerable amount of time before other people did. At the beginning of 2010, a major studio made a proposal for a film that would feature both of these men together, but Keanu immediately denied the offer. His justification was straightforward, communicated in a low voice to a producer. The arts are not produced by chaos. It brings about its destruction. Longer than 15 years have passed, and the distance has not changed. There was never a time when Alec Baldwin was Keanu's competitor. There were no talks, no greets at events, and no images from the same frame. It was he who brought to your attention the fact that not every storm is deserving of a spot in your sky. What happens when Hollywood power collides with quiet strength? Why did one moment behind closed doors make Keanu silently cut ties forever? Shia LaBeouf. On the other hand, if Alec Baldwin was the storm that Keanu Reeves learnt to avoid, then Shia LaBeouf was the wildfire that he decided to eliminate from his life forever. Their disconnection did not develop gradually over time. When Shia breached a line that Keanu considered to be sacred for the first time, it completely fell into place. The dividing line between creative expression and disorder. They first came into contact with one another in the middle of the 2000s. The interior of a studio workshop that was attended by performers of varying ages and from a variety of backgrounds. Respect was intended to be maintained throughout the session, which served as a forum for artists to share their thoughts. Shia, on the other hand, transformed it into a performance space for disruption. He made fun of established actors, saying that they were too stiff, too predictable, and too old school. In spite of the fact that the room was filled with laughter, it was the kind that was uncomfortable, the kind that concealed embarrassment rather than excitement. At a distance of barely a few chairs, Keanu remained silently observing the scene. Something changed within the interior. Subsequently, he disclosed to a producer that Shia had mistakenly interpreted troublemaking as depth. The tone for everything that came after that silent assessment was established from that point on. A charity banquet that was held 2 years later with the intention of raising money for children's programs was the location of the actual fracture. The event was constructed on the principles of kindness, generosity, and genuine concern for others. When Shia came, she was obviously inebriated, boisterous, and eager to provoke. He then switched his focus to Keanu, after which he screamed against the fake saints that Hollywood casts. The individual referred to him as dull, robotic, and excessively quiet for a company that was on fire. It was tense in the room. People smiled, even though they did not feel like smiling. The voice of Keanu was not raised at any point. He did not deliver a lecture. For all intents and purposes, he stated that harshness is never an indication of honesty, but rather a show of fear. After that, he exited the room, leaving everyone in a state of shock. Following the events of that night, the entire globe started to notice the pattern that Keanu had already identified. There was a spate of arrests, a string of bar fights, outbursts on sets, and performance art pieces that blurred the line between vulnerability and self-destruction. Shia's name surfaced as a result of these incidents on multiple occasions. Unpredictability was described as a complaint from directors. Co-stars revealed that they had emotional whiplash. The tales became more audible with each passing year. According to Keanu, this was not an act of defiance. In reality, it was recklessness that was disguised as depth. Keanu almost instantly declined the invitation to work with them in a gritty action drama that was being proposed by a major studio at the beginning of 2010. He described the atmosphere as one that was dangerous. Although it would not be dangerous for him, it would be dangerous for the entire crew because they would have to operate around instability. Moreover, the separation was finalized at that very instant. There are no pleasantries at premieres, no handshakes extended out of courtesy, and no polite nods from a distance. Before it consumed everything in its path, Shia LaBeouf became the kind of chaos that Keanu Reeves had gained the ability to escape from. What did Keanu witness that made him walk away without a word? And why did this one moment reveal the dangerous side of genius? Jared Leto. Jared Leto was something stranger, something colder. Not a storm and not a flame, but a type of darkness that stole softly through halls and settled into a set without warning. If Shia LaBeouf was the wildfire that Keanu Reeves refused to let approach him, then Jared Leto was something that was much stranger. The presence of this individual did not merely disrupt the job. Rather, it completely altered the environment that was surrounding it. There was no personal insult or heated disagreement that caused them to become so tense with one another. Stories were the source of it. Long before any actor shared the same room, there were stories that were whispered by cast members who were fatigued. Narratives of method acting went so far beyond the boundaries of acceptable behavior that the distinction between commitment and cruelty became hazy and eventually disappeared. It came to Keanu's attention that assistants were receiving frightening artifacts that were brought to their cabins. He was informed that scenes had been modified without prior notice due to Jared's refusal to deviate from his role. After an interaction that was supposed to be fake, but gave the impression of being brutally real, he heard of performers who were left shaking. The moment Keanu began to listen to these narratives, he experienced a tightening of something within him. He had devoted decades of his life to the cause of preserving the unassuming dignity of film. Whether on purpose or not, Jared Leto made it impossible for silence to exist. A closed-door casting meeting for a psychological thriller took place in the early 2000s, and it was during this meeting that Keanu made the decision that would forever change his life. Earlier than the concept could even take a breath, a filmmaker proposed that the two men be paired together. Keanu shook his head, leaned back, and finally let out a slow exhalation. He asserted that inflicting pain on other individuals is not a strategy, and that fear is not a tool for performance. It wasn't because of disagreement that the audience became silent. Rather, it was because of recognition. It was clear to everyone who he was referring to. While everything was going on, Jared's behavior continued to worsen. According to the reports that circulated, he persisted in executing acrobatics without coordination, which resulted in the commencement of injuries. Complaints were submitted by cast members while they remained anonymous, describing emotional distress. The crew members recounted the unpredictability of the demands, which extended the days into the nights. And as they were filming a high-profile comic book project, the narrative transformed into something that was nearly unreal. The production atmosphere was transformed into a battleground of nerves, and they sent dead animals to their co-workers. They also distributed upsetting artifacts without providing any context. From a distance, Keanu saw these events, and every new headline felt like confirmation of what he already knew. He did not believe that Jared's excesses were an indication of his dedication to the craft. They were a symbol of danger that was disguised as talent. Over the course of the subsequent years, studios made numerous attempts to cast the two guys in the same ensemble film. Keanu failed to offer a speech or a list of reasons for his refusal, each and every time he declined without any hesitation. In the same way that a guy would refuse to walk back into a burning building, he simply stood his ground and refused in a quiet and consistent manner. At this point in time, Keanu Reeves and Jared Leto come from completely different sides of the profession. Even though they go to the same premieres, they never say hello to one another. In spite of the fact that they attend the same award presentations, they never share a stage together. As if they were two planets that were separated by gravity itself, they make their way through the same universe. Jared Leto has become the one thing that Keanu cannot let come close to his place of employment. Rather than chaos or ego, the concept that suffering might be justified in the sake of art is being discussed. Victor Hale. Victor Hale wasn't a villain, but he carried an intensity that unsettled every room he walked into. He rose quickly through Hollywood, gifted on screen, unpredictable everywhere else. Keanu first crossed paths with him during rehearsals for a major action film, where the two were meant to play partners. From the very first table read, the atmosphere felt wrong. Victor arrived late, interrupted other actors, spoke over scenes, and closed his script loudly in frustration. The cast exchanged uneasy glances, and Keanu immediately sensed a tension he had learned never to ignore. The real turning point came during stunt rehearsals. Victor refused to follow the carefully planned choreography, insisting on performing scenes at full force. In one unscripted moment, he launched a strike that would have caused serious injury if Keanu hadn't stepped back at the perfect second. The stunt team rushed in, shaken and angry, realizing the situation could have gone badly. Keanu didn't raise his voice or confront him. Instead, he quietly walked off set, thanked the director for the opportunity, and withdrew from the project entirely. Later, he explained to the producer that he would not work in an environment where the safety of the crew and cast was at risk. From that day on, Victor Hale stayed permanently off his list. Val Kilmer. In the same way that Jared Leto exemplified the peril of expanding the boundaries of artistic expression, Val Kilmer exemplified a totally different kind of risk. This is not anarchy or unpredictability. Rather, it is ego that has been polished like a blade. Val Kilmer had a reputation that was so widespread that it circulated throughout casting offices in the 1990s that it was like a rumor that developed into a legend. There is no doubt that he is a gifted actor. Nonetheless, his self-assurance frequently arrived well before the performance itself. In the same manner that everyone else did, Keanu Reeves was aware of rumors that circulated about him. A habit of dismissing colleagues with a gaze that cut worse than words ever could. Stories of stressful rehearsals, spontaneous outbursts, and a tendency of dismissing colleagues with a glance. Despite this, Keanu maintained an open mind. It was always the case. He believed that humans had the ability to surprise you in ways that rumors could never do. Additionally, Val Kilmer did surprise him, but not in the manner that he had hoped for. Their tension started out in a low-key manner. During the early 1990s, both men were frequently considered for roles that were comparable to one another, particularly in action dramas where restraint or intensity may be responsible for defining a film. During the auditions, Keanu showed a humble attitude by being early, being well-prepared, and showing respect. Val moved at them as if he were on a battlefield. There was a story that was recounted by members of the team about Val watching one of Keanu's audition tapes and grumbling that the performance was too straightforward. It's not a dearth of talent, it's just a missing fire. The comment was passed along the way. In many cases, careless words are, and Keanu did not experience any feelings of wrath when it reached him. The way that people occasionally treat one another caused him to feel a simple form of melancholy, which he referred to as disappointment. After attending a formal studio dinner in the middle of the 1990s, the turning point occurred. It was warmly lit, and directors, writers, and performers were seated around tables that had been polished. In theory, the evening ought to have been a calm one. On the other hand, Val Kilmer confronted a rookie cameraman and voiced his disapproval of the lighting in front of the entire environment. Like heat rising off of asphalt, the tension increased. Keanu made a gentle intervention in an effort to calm the situation down. When Val turned toward him, he gave him a stare that had the entire table frozen in place. He advised Keanu not to exhibit the behavior of a knowledgeable monk. When it came to Keanu, that was the final straw. The disrespectful statements are not the issue. Every member of the crew relied on the manner in which a man addressed another individual. Following that point, Keanu established a boundary that was devoid of noise. At the beginning of 2000, a major studio made a proposal for a picture that would put both men on an equal footing. Keanu turned down the offer without any hesitation. There is no rage, no speech, but only firmness. Today, when they pass each other at events, there is no drama and no hostility, only distance. A calm, permanent distance carved by a single truth Keanu holds close. It is possible to be talented without putting down the people who bolster your own abilities. Shaun Young. Shaun Young taught Keanu Reeves the cost of unpredictability, a lingering kind that alters the atmosphere in a room the moment a person enters it, as opposed to the sharp kind that explodes and then fades away. It was once believed that Shaun Young was one of the most talented individuals of her generation. Nevertheless, there was a volatility that existed behind the elegance in the gaze that directors admired, and it made every project feel like a coin that was continually turning. You had no way of knowing which side would come out on top. During a rehearsal for the industry that was attended by only a few actors, Keanu first came into contact with her in the late 1980s. It was intended for the rehearsal to be a calm and uncomplicated environment, a place where the actors could test out scenes without feeling any pressure. The door was pushed open with force by Shaun, who arrived late, and she dropped her script onto the table with such force that it echoed the room. After only a few minutes, she was already accusing the director of showing favoritism. The energy started to thicken, and the room began to shift. Keanu remained silent on the scene, perceiving the impending storm long before it actually materialized. When they met for the second time, it was during a casting session for a major studio project in the middle of the 1990s. This was the encounter that permanently changed the course of their relationship. There was already a sense of tension in the air. The performers were full of anxiety. The producers had reached their max capacity. The entrance was made by Shaun Young with the assurance of someone who was convinced that she had complete command of the entire space. In order to turn vulnerability into entertainment, she publicly mocked the performance of a young actress. After that, she cast a glance in Keanu's direction and made a remark about how the industry favored more reserved men like him because they were simple to manipulate. It was Keanu who did not argue. He made no attempt to defend himself. Once he had finished writing in his notebook, he simply stood up and left the room. This sentiment remained with him for many years, after he had a conversation with a close colleague later that evening. He stated that confidence that is wrapped around cruelty is still cruelty. Over the course of time, Shaun Young's reputation continued to become more difficult to trust. In the headlines, there were stories about incidents that involved alcohol. Directors whispered about unscheduled visits to sets that she had not been hired for while they were speaking. Participants in the production recounted arguments that broke out without any prior warning. The press events evolved into full-blown spectacles. The list continued to grow longer and more unpredictable with each passing year. In Keanu's opinion, this did not constitute eccentricity. Threats were present. Not the kind that manifests itself physically, but the kind that causes an entire cast and crew to become unstable emotionally. The film is easily damaged. A single unforeseeable force has the potential to upset the equilibrium that everyone has worked so diligently to preserve. When Keanu was offered a part in a thriller in the middle of 2000, he immediately declined the offer. He also found out that Shaun Young was being considered for a supporting role in the film. One of the producers insisted that she had made progress. Keanu provided a response that was composed. It was important to him that no one should ever be hurt again. The gap between them has remained enormous and unspoken ever since that time. It is not appropriate to greet people at festivals, engage in polite conversation, or share space unless it is absolutely necessary. Keanu Reeves learned to steer clear of storms like Shaun Young long before they reached their fullest intensity. This is not out of anger or judgment. Rather, it is for the purpose of providing protection to those individuals who step onto a set with the expectation that it will be a secure environment in which to have a job. Keanu Reeves began to recognize a pattern within the industry that he had spent more than 3 decades working in after he had maintained a silent distance from the actors who crossed his boundaries for over a number of years. This is not a pattern of competition or ego, but rather something more fundamental. What neither a camera nor a spotlight can reveal is something that cannot be captured. In a world where tempers rise faster than talent, and where the chaos of a single person can derail the work of an entire crew, the cost of surviving is a significant problem. Not only did Alec Baldwin, Shia LaBeouf, Jared Leto, and Val Kilmer have their own unique stories, but they were not isolated storms. Their presence was a sign of something more significant. Every time Keanu stepped onto a set, he carried with him a truth that he rarely spoke out loud but brought with him. Although Hollywood was a brilliant industry, it was also fragile. Not only did it glow brightly, but it was also easily broken. While at the same time encouraging creative thinking, it allowed employees to engage in behaviors that would never be tolerated in any other workplace. Because a celebrity was having a bad day, Keanu had seen young assistants crying their eyes out. In the aftermath of reckless outbursts, he had witnessed makeup artists frantically trying to repair the damage they had caused. He had witnessed directors lose control of the situation when their egos became more loud than the script. In addition to this, he had witnessed how a single unstable presence could drain the energy of an entire production. In the early 2010, Keanu came to the realization that his boundaries were not based on pride. They were not about his own survival, but rather about the survival of the groups of people who relied on composed leadership in order to carry out their tasks in a secure manner. He was of the opinion that the film industry ought to have the atmosphere of a cooperative effort rather than a conflict zone, a place where actors built each other up rather than tearing each other down. On the other hand, Hollywood had a pattern of justifying destructive behavior within the context of the art world. Ka was celebrated as a form of passion, and it rewarded unpredictability with headlines. Keanu recognized the fallacy of that illusion. In terms of creativity and cruelty, he was aware of the distinction between commitment and recklessness, as well as between intensity and cruelty. It was never in his nature to express these ideas through dramatic speeches. It was never that he called anyone out. His actions were merely the result of his choices. Projects that he perceived to be risky were rejected by him. He removed himself from the company of individuals whose disorder brought their craft into disrepute. In situations where respect was violated, he left the room. Not only did he protect his own peace with each quiet decision he made, but he also protected the peace of everyone else who was in his immediate vicinity. The conflicts that shocked fans were not simply stories about ego or anger, as the conclusion of the story was revealed. A place where brilliance thrives, but only when the storm stays outside, they are windows into a Hollywood that very few people ever get to see. Keanu Reeves made the conscious decision to maintain the demeanor that allows the lights to remain on. However, The stories that you have just listened to are not really about conflict at all. In a world that rarely rewards peace, they are about boundaries, dignity, and the quiet strength that comes from choosing peace. Keanu Reeves never raised his voice, never fought for attention, and never attempted to win a battle due to his inflated sense of self-importance. When he was with Bob, he demonstrated something that was significantly more powerful: the bravery to pull away, the maturity to safeguard those who are close to him, and the insight to realize that talent is meaningless if it is not accompanied by respect. The loudest person in the room is frequently the subject of celebration in Hollywood. On the other hand, this video serves as a reminder that true character is developed through the way in which one treats other people, through the decisions that one makes when no one is applauding, and through the courage that is required to refuse chaos, even when the world expects one to conform to it. Thanks for watching. If this breakdown gave you a new perspective on Hollywood's hidden battles, hit that subscribe button and drop a 1 in the comments so I know you stayed till the end. Click on the next video popping on your screen now.